Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here for our webinar series, FAA Special Issuances Explained. My name is Tammy, and I'm a volunteer with Clear Skies Ahead. I am a retired airline pilot who has been familiar with the HIMS process for the last 2 decades. We're really glad you chose to spend this hour with us. This webinar is hosted by Clear Skies Ahead, a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving health and safety of aviation professionals and enthusiasts through research, education, and support. We advocate for improvements to the aeromedical system. We also believe safety depends on cultural change within aviation, one where health and well-being are treated as foundational, not something to be hidden or delayed. A quick clarification before we begin. Most volunteers at CSA have been through or are currently going through the process themselves. These sessions are aimed to fill the gap that we identified by providing a resource we wish we had had while working to regain our medicals. By sharing our experiences, we hope to support you in your own journey towards medical certification. Clear Skies Ahead does not provide one-on-one counseling, medical advice, legal guidance, or individual case reviews. This is the sixth session in a 12-part webinar series designed specifically for non-airline aviators, navigating the FAA medical certification issues related to mental health and substance use. A note on the term non-airline aviators. We had to come up with a term that to include everyone that requires a medical that is not protected by their airline or the union oversight. So this includes student pilots, general aviation, Part 91, Part 135, CFI, Ag, Drone, ATC, DOT positive terminated pilots. Every airline pilot starts out as a non-airline aviator. Before we dive into today's topic, this slide outlines all 12 sessions in the series, so you can see how this one fits into the syllabus. Our website, clearskiesaheadnonprofit.org, serves as the central hub for this series, hosting recordings, supplemental reading, and practical tools that expand on each session's content. The session today focuses on FAA HIMS SI process, which evaluates the risk associated with the medical, and it provides background and resources aviators need to navigate them. So HIMS refers to Human Intervention Motivational Study. The HIMS program is an occupational substance abuse treatment program dedicated to helping all pilots return to the cockpit. You can reference information at himsprogram.com. The term has evolved to include HIMS qualified doctors and specialists to oversee mental health and substance use cases for non-airline aviators as well. The term SI stands for Special Issuance. Over the next hour, today's format will include a personal story, a brief educational overview, a visit with HIMS AME Dr. Timmons and licensed aviation psychologist Dr. Abigail Powell, and a moderator Q&A with a panel. We do believe that understanding the system begins with listening to lived experiences. Storytelling builds on connection, reduces stigma, and reminds us that no one navigates this journey alone. It also allows those of us who share to find meaning in their experience and to help others along the way. So our first speaker today is Davis. Today's story highlights a student pilot who sought the care he needed prior to starting his pilot training. Initially, he believed he would not be able to qualify for an FAA medical certificate due to his mental health journey. He is bringing us his perspective, resilience, and a story that can help others move forward. He'll share what life was like before, what led him to take action, and what it's been like navigating the FAA medical process. David's story is not meant to tell anyone what to do, but to remind us behind every FAA policy and process, there's a person. So thank you, Davis, for being here and being willing to share your story.
Thank you, guys. I just want to go ahead and thank Clear Skies Ahead for having me and giving me the opportunity to share my story. I'm currently working through my private pilot's license, and I would say that my journey becoming pilot is not the normal one for the majority of people. I was diagnosed with severe depression, ADHD, and anxiety when I was around 12, 13 years old, and it's something that I knew almost immediately was wrong. I started isolating myself. I lost the motivation to pretty much do anything that I used to enjoy. And it started even manifesting itself in physical ways. The best way I could probably describe it is kind of like I was carrying around a cannonball inside of my chest, just constant pressure and pain from it. And that went on for many years. There were many moments of glimmers of hope when I would move on to a new medication and it would work for a little bit. But oftentimes, as soon as it came and on and worked, it would go away. And then I would be cast back down to darkness again. I lived in a world without color, and I spent a lot of time and a lot of work to get better. I've been on dozens of different medications. I've spent hours in with my doctor in the office. My battle with depression felt like a never-ending journey where I'd just be caught in kind of like the waves. I would go up for air, there'd be sunshine, and then the next thing I know, I'd be cast back under again. Through all that time, I fought and continued to work through the process and try different treatments, and I never gave up. After 10 years of dealing with depression and making it through the most difficult and harsh moments of my life, my doctor declared that my depression was in full remission and that I no longer needed treatment. It's about 5 years ago when that happened, but that's not where my journey as a pilot began. I've always been interested in aviation. I took my first discovery flight when I was around 15, and it was everything I could have imagined. But because of the challenges that I was facing at the time, it seemed like something that I'd never be able to achieve. So over the years, I pursued something aviation adjacent, and I went into aerospace engineering. After I left college, I got a job working at a local airport as a gate agent. I spent a lot of my time talking with different pilots and learning about their career path and learning about their different stories, and it just made me want to pursue being a pilot even more. I was often asked why didn't I pursue being a pilot, and I would explain my story and my history, and I would often be told that I would never be able to obtain a first class medical, or that if I wanted to get it, I would just have to lie on with my AME. That was all up until one day I met a pilot and we were going through a normal routine of me talking with him and sharing my story, and he asking me why I didn't pursue being a being a pilot. And then he told me that he had a similar story, that he had depression and that he went through the HIMS process. That was my first moment when I learned about the HIMS process. And that ignited a fire inside of me. I spent the next week researching everything I possibly could about the HIMS process. And then I spent the next 6 months getting all my paperwork together. I had a medical summary of about 10 years, boiled down to about 2 pages. And after continuing to chat with different pilots and researching the forums and trying to find an AME that would be my best fit, the day came where I made the appointment. I went in for the evaluation. I provided all the paperwork that I could and had at the time, and I got deferred. This wasn't a surprise. I was kind of expecting it. What I wasn't expecting was that same AME told me that if I went through the process and I filed everything that they asked for, that he doesn't see any reason that I should be denied for my first class medical. That was a moment that was incredibly relieving, because it's one thing having a pilot or a friend or a family member tell you that you're good and that you should be able to get through. It's another having an aviation medical professor or professional tell you that you'll get through. So I then spent the next 10 months working through the process. I went to a HIMS AME, and it was relatively smooth compared to some of the other stories that I've heard, thanks to a lot of the work that are done by the people in this community. And to be quite honest with you, it probably could have been shorted down to more about 4 months. But we had a couple of errors with the faxes in the modern times. But once I got all my paperwork in, I was checking every single day, just waiting for the denial approval letter. I actually found out that there's a way I can figure out if I got approved online. So I would log in every single night and check to see if I was approved. And I'll never forget that moment. I was coming into Charlotte, And I just landed. It was like 10 p.m. at night. And I get off the airplane, and I check my phone for that website. And then I saw my name and then first class medical next to it. That moment was very, very overwhelming. I broke down in tears in the middle of the Charlotte airport. Um, Still get emotional thinking about it. It was something that I never thought I would ever achieve. And thanks to the work that is done here and by pilots before me, I was able to achieve getting my first class medical. Um, I quit my job about 2 months later, and I'm now full-time into pilot training with my eventual goal of hopefully flying wide bodies for the airliners. I've been a mental health advocate for many years. I believe that every time one of us share our stories, it helps move society in the correct direction. Some people say that my history is a weakness. It's something that other people should look out for. I don't see it that way. While my life has not been the easiest, and that time was incredibly difficult and something I would not wish upon anyone, it is something that I would never trade. The tools that I gained along those times were are some of the most valuable tools. I can now share my story with others and have it affect people in ways I never thought would ever be possible. I've had people come up to me, tell me that sharing my story inspired them to get the help that they needed. I've had pilots come up to me after hearing my story and tell them that they are now going to be seeking um, help for issues that they're having or be truthful on their medical because they're no longer afraid of the stigma of mental health. It's so interesting because when I was going through it, I felt so alone. Um, but after being with this group and seeing that the progress we made, it's no longer that way. My hope is that one day that these conversations will normalize mental health in a way that people do not feel shame speaking about the struggles that they're going through. I never thought I would be a pilot. Um, and it wasn't until another pilot shared his story with me that I started my journey in becoming a pilot. You're not alone in this fight. Groups like this are the best of society. There's so many people and so many of us in aviation who are not getting the help that they need or not being honest about their history. And even though they no longer need treatment, they're still scared to tell the truth. And but I've seen the change. I think all of us have seen the change of how quicker and easier it is to get through this process. I had severe depression for 10 years. I've been on dozens of different medications, and I still walked away with not only a medical, but I didn't even get a special issuance. I walked away with a full first class medical. That way, the way it used to be isn't the way that it is now. So don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to share your story, because as long as you get the help that you need and you work through the process, you'll be back in the skies in no time. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Davis. It was very fun to hear the joy of your story too. Okay, well, as you heard, our stories highlight something that we often hear when aviators take responsible, proactive steps for their health, navigating the FAA medical process. It can still feel confusing, isolating, and cultural biases and norms can prevent us from taking that action, but it pays off in the long run, not only the healthier life, but your medical besides. All right, so we are going to shift now to the educational portion of today's session. I'm going to turn things over to Stephanie Day, the General Aviation Representative on the HIMS Advisory Board, who will now discover the process that the AMEs, sorry, she's going to discuss. She already knows the process the AMEs use when they are evaluating an applicant who has a background of mental health treatment. And these can be referred to as disposition tables. So Stephanie, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Tammy. And thank you, Davis, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope through the process. So grateful um, for your sharing today. And I uh, I have to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I am on the HIMS Advisory Board as the General Aviation Representative. I got that role or stepped into that role because I have had a challenging journey myself and wanted to be an advocate for all of us who don't have a voice in this. And I have been successful in getting my special issuance. Thankfully, after a long journey in March, I'll be sharing my story in the next session coming up in July or August, one of those. So stay tuned to hear the full version. And I am not an expert. I would say I'm more of an expert in the substance use and HIMS, the mental health. There's so much involved. And so I have brought Dr. Timmons on to help us navigate through this tonight. He's going to help us go through some of the disposition tables and discuss and just kind of give you a starting place of where you might go to start your journey. Our goal here at Clear Skies and the webinars is to provide information and empower you to have the knowledge and to move forward so that you can go to your doctors, your AME, psychologists, psychiatrists, and be informed on what you are giving to them and also what you need from them to move forward in the process to obtain your medical certificate. I also wanted to say that, and I'm sure Dr. Timmons will attest to this, that everybody's case is unique. And that is why we have these disposition tables and guidance for the AMEs. But when it comes down to the FAA evaluating it, they are looking at everybody's case individually. I am still surprised by stories that I hear and of people who are making it through the process. So don't think you're a lost cause or think you're not going to make it through. Just keep getting the information and taking the next step forward. So I just want to put this out here. This is officially our topic tonight, mental health and SSRIs. But I am going to go through, kind of stumble along navigating through my own computer sharing screens here. I'm actually going to start with our website at Clear Skies Ahead. And we are just going to walk through this just so that I can show you where the information is if you're going there. So this is the homepage of Clear Skies Ahead nonprofit.org. You would go up here to medical certification info, click on non-airline aviators, and this would be the page here. And if you keep going down, so this was my airplane that I had. This is me flying in there a couple years ago. Unfortunately, I did have to sell it, but I miss her very much. Her name was Maya. So the description of non-airline aviators. And then here are the quick links. And a lot of the information that we're going to put on, that we're going to cover tonight are in these quick links. We have the Guide for Aviation Medical Examiners here at the top, and then substance use information under here, mental health information under on the right side there. And then if you keep going down, you will click, you'll see the whole monthly webinar series. And this is still needing to be updated. We'll be working on it on the next couple weeks to get everything on there. But if you also want to come on and see our previous webinars, if you go up to events, then you can see the webinars here. And if you click these links, they will take you to the YouTube recording of the webinar. So wanted to go over that. Now I'm going to go over to where do you find this information on the FAA website? So honestly, you can search and searching, if you put in disposition tables or disposition after anxiety and depression, you'll be able to find a lot of this. But we're going to start back at the beginning under the FAA.gov/AME_guide. So this is the guide for aviation medical examiners. Then you would click on decision considerations and then aerospace medical dispositions, and then go down to item 47, psychiatric conditions. Click on that. And now we have a lot of the disposition tables and guidance for anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, situational depression, and we have the new guidance on therapy and psychotherapy and counseling. I'm going to pull in Dr. Timmons at this time. He is our resident HIMS AME that is helping us explain a lot of this information from the AME standpoint. And Dr. Timmons, are you there?
Yes. Hi.
Okay, there he is. I will just pick one and we can kind of touch on it. Which would you like to start with?
Well, so I'll start by saying one of the first things I do is talk to somebody, get a quick history of how they ended up there, and then I go over the different pathways, some of which are listed here, including path 1, which is discontinuing medication, as Davis had mentioned, and then path 2, which is staying on a medication. And then I start going through these tables to see which one would apply to somebody, because there's, as you said, everybody's case is a little bit different. And you can't assume just because one person is going through it that it's going to be the same experience for everybody going through it. And so these tables, once you figure out where you are in the pathways, these tables are a good guide to go through.
All right, let's just start with the, let's look at this one here. Actually, I think this one is the pathway to go over.
There you go.
And I'll go ahead and let you describe it a little bit here.
Yeah, so this is actually fairly new within the past year or two, and it's a fast track consideration pathway. So the key element is someone has been off of medication for over 2 years. If that's not the case, or or you're in any of the yes categories here. So you basically go down, answer the questions. If any of the answers are in the yes column, then you would not be able to use that pathway and you'd be on the standard pathway.
And one thing I want to say about from the aviator point of view, which we've talked about before, and is that it is a little bit dependent on your AME, on who you're seeing, as far as, of course, yes, if there's anything in the yes category, then that's going to put you into the deferred and in a different category. But as far as somebody who going to an AME who may not have very much experience with the mental health, anxiety, depression, they may still, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, Dr. Timmons, but it feels like it is still a little dependent on who you're seeing, if they are comfortable with issuing, or if they're going to defer to the FAA.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. Not every AME is gonna practice the same way. It's just any doctor you see is like that. One might do something one way and one will do it a different way. Um, but at least these guidelines add some semblance of um, a guide or a path to keep things consistent as much as possible. But yeah, there's going to be some variation.
Yeah, and also I would say that that's not it's because all of this is still very new as well, right? Because we're not the doctors haven't been fully trained. Some of them they have their training every 3 years that they have to have updated AME and HIMS training. And so as people go through their updated training, they're going to hear this information more and more from the FAA and start to get more comfortable with it. But this is still new guidance, and it's a huge, huge change from where we were before, which is, really not having a pathway, and not being able to issue. So as you can see there, so that was the decision pathway. This would be the disposition table. And it's kind of the same information, basically, just laid out a little bit differently. So it's just going through it and having it laid out a little bit differently. Would you agree with that, Dr. Timmons?
Yeah, exactly. This helps kind of put into view where someone is at in the process, and then that gives you your guide or map for how to approach a situation and how to make a plan with the AME that you're working with.
So I know a lot of people are there's post-traumatic stress disorder is another one that a lot of people have, that a lot of veterans have experience with. What would you have to say about the PTSD
Yeah, so
disorder?
yeah, lots of people come out of the military and part of their getting out process is going through a VA medical evaluation, and they might get this listed on their diagnosis page for that, and you can't hide that from the FAA. I encourage people, do not hide anything. Them finding it out later, by accident, is probably worse than having to go through the process of getting it sorted out just by being honest. So I cringe whenever I hear someone say, don't tell, don't tell the FAA or don't tell your AME something. Um, but yeah, so there is a process. That's the best thing about all of this, is there did not used to be, and now there is. So it just needs to be sorted out and follow the steps. A deferral doesn't mean denial. It just means that more information and more review is needed before a decision is made, and hopefully a good decision.
Uh, yes. And I think we'll switch gears over here to the SSRIs because we wanted to definitely touch on that pathway. So if you go under use of antidepressant medications, that is going to bring up the antidepressant protocol explanation. And this would have the SRI decision path, which Dr. Timmons said is the no medications, correct? Do you want to discuss this one?
Yeah, exactly. So one pathway, and this is a confusing one because the FAA doesn't really acknowledge this. They do not want to um, look like they're talking somebody out of medical treatment. So sometimes it can be difficult to get it across to them that this is the path someone is going to take. Um, and it might take a couple of times of notifying them I'm off medication. I'm no longer taking it. And I'm going path one. It might take a couple times of doing that before they will actually acknowledge that and move forward. So, but that is an option. You have to be off 60 days and then get a reevaluation from your doctor and forward that, and then there still may be additional information and evaluations required, but at least it gets you started down that path if it's a possibility.
And then you have, do we have pathway two, decision path one,
Yep, right there.
decision path two? A little more complicated.
Yeah, yeah. This one is the more traditional pathway, staying on medication. It's still called SSRI decision path, but there are four different types of medications that are now approved. I think nine total. It's not just the original four SSRIs that were originally approved. So there are more options now, which is great. And but this fairly quickly outlines the steps that are going to be needed.
And so the steps that are needed, let's go to the SSRI decision path two, the HIMS. Sorry, that was what we just clicked on. Here we go. Airman information. So this would be the airman information for the SSRI path. And it talks about the FAA certification aid. And this is like what we went over last session for the drug and alcohol protocols. It basically lists out what you need. This first part here is the personal statement, and then HIMS AME, what they need, and the treating physician. This is the guide to follow as you're building your package. And again, I just came back from the HIMS seminar in Hawaii, where they were the FAA was discussing and highlighting how quickly cases are moving through. And those are cases that have a complete package put together. So if once they receive your package, there's everything there that they need to make a determination. They are having pretty quick turnarounds with those complete packages. If they're missing a personal statement or they're missing the psychological evaluation, they're going to come back. That's the snail mail process. They're going to send you a letter. It's going to take you a while to get the letter. It's going to take a while to get the evaluation or whatever that is missing, and then resend it back in. Those are where the delays are really going to be adding up the time to in your case. What would you like to say about this certification aid, Dr. Timmons?
Yeah, this is a good comprehensive sort of a checklist. I usually sit down and go through this with somebody. It just points out the different aspects of the application that's going to be submitted. And as you said, there's the airman part, there's the HIMS AME part, the psychiatrist, the psychologist, and then the treating physician if the treating physician is not a psychiatrist. So just putting all those parts together into the final package is the HIMS AME's responsibility and to get it submitted. But this is a good it's very comprehensive, but it's a good general thing to go over.
Yeah, covers the psychiatrist. Anything you want to say about the personal statement? We talked a lot about the personal statement for substance use. What would you say about the personal statement for the SSRI pathway or mental health?
Yeah, so what I do is I cut and paste that section and send it to somebody up at the top of page 1 there and say this is the information that they would like to see, however they want to write it, but that's the information they would like to see included in the personal statement. Some people literally say 1A and they list it out. Some people just write it more in a free form format, in paragraphs and, kind of more tell a story with it. But as long as all those things are touched on or, the ones that are applicable, they're happy with it. I will say the biggest thing people leave out is their name or their signature or the date. And all of those things have to be on there. It'll get sent back if there's no name, signature, or date on there.
Okay, thank you. The last thing I want to touch on here is the new therapy, psychotherapy, and counseling guidance that came out. It's not entirely new information, just information put together. I will say that for me, when I was reading through it, I do feel like there's a lot of good information, again, to help you decide if seeking therapy is a good choice for you. I feel that we're still, the FAA is really still looking to push you towards peer support and maybe a non-paper trail way of handling your mental health before seeking therapy and getting a diagnosis. And our hope at Clear Skies Ahead is that, everything gets normalized enough to really seeking therapy and counseling is good preventative health. But as we can see in this guidance here, it says counseling or therapy is encouraged when medically appropriate. And I think the reason why it states that also is that when you do use your insurance, you are going to have a diagnosis code with that. And then that needs to be disclosed. That's what I'm going to share about it from the aviator perspective. Dr. Timmons, what would you like to share?
Yeah,
And
that's a good point is if anytime you see a medical provider, whatever it's for, in order to get paid, in order for that to be a legal visit, if you will, they have to put a diagnosis down. They have to put something down. And so that's the really tricky part is because someone might see somebody once and come away from that and think, okay, I don't have that diagnosis, but a diagnosis was entered in their medical record. And if that ever gets shown somewhere, especially with the electronic medical record, it gets forwarded on in perpetuity. It will show up on someone's record as they did get a diagnosis, and it can be a little confusing for some people. I've had that situation many times. So, and not saying don't seek help. I'm just saying be aware of that and possibly have have the discussion with the provider that you're seeing about what they're going to put down for a diagnosis and how it might affect them. The information that one that you're hovering over, the information for the psychotherapists treating pilots and ATCs, that's a good thing to print out for someone and bring to them. And I even tell people to have the therapist call me if they have questions for what to do.
okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think we went over a lot of information there. And I appreciate all of that. I am going to see if we have our Dr. Abigail Powell is on. She is an aviation therapist, psychologist, and I'm bringing her over as a panelist. Love for her to share a few minutes, and then we'll go into the Q&A.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Powell.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What would you like to add on all of this information?
So the biggest key factor is if you can afford it, then using self-pay when seeking psychotherapy specifically, mainly because it does not require a diagnosis. When using insurance, the intake process, as someone who has been in both a insurance-based practice and a private pay practice, the intake process becomes what can I diagnose you with so we can get started and so I can guarantee that there is payment. And then with private pay, it moves to, okay, how can we do the most effective treatment for you? Because with insurance, they've disclosed the right when you sign a contract to take your notes as well. So if utilizing any sort of private insurance, then I would have to give my notes to that insurance company when in network. And so, with that being said, we would have to prove medical necessity every single time. And if somebody is not trained in proper diagnosis, or if they have not kept up with the diagnostic criteria, then there is a chance of either embellishing details in order to prove medical necessity or possibly giving the wrong diagnosis. So I am biased to private pay as I do have my own private pay practice. However, I have been able to see much more success with aviators in a much faster amount of time because you are not constrained by different insurance companies. So it is a huge plus.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Powell. I am also going to pull over. We have one of our HIMS psychiatrists on, Dr. Sargent, Dr. Paul Sargent. I'm going to pull him over as a panelist and ask if he wants to add any tidbits of knowledge, and then we'll go into our Q&A. Thanks, Dr. Sargent, for being on and joining us.
Hi, guys.
Anything you
Thanks
want
for
to
having
add
me.
on this subject?
No, I think it's a great discussion. Can you hear me okay? Just sound check.
Yes.
Great. No, really great discussion. I mean, Davis, you have such a powerful story, and I really wish that people could kind of hear and capture that more broadly. This may sound strange, but you come across as so credible, right? And you are just so credible and honest in your discussion. And I think a good example of somebody who follows the rules, follows the process, and gets through it. There's so many other voices out there saying to cheat the process or subvert things. And it's a shame when that happens. Inevitably, it comes up just like anything. And then there's a bigger problem because now somebody lacks credibility, right? They come back and they don't really have, the history of honesty on their side. So I really think you told a great personal journey. And I hope it just keeps working for you. And Dr. Timmons, I think your explanation of the pathway and the 9 medications that are now approved is actually really, really spot on. There's medications that I haven't even prescribed. I've been a psychiatrist for 20 years, and there's certain things like Vibrid. I need to prescribe that more. That looks really cool. And yeah, it's on the list, right? So this idea like we don't have options isn't really there. Communicating early and often with your AME, I think that's just huge because people are feeling like they're having to walk through the process blindly. And there is information out there and there are best practices. There's ways to do it right. There's ways to do it wrong. And when you talk to your AME, you get good advice about like, here's how you write your personal statement. Don't forget to sign it, date it, and have your name on there, right? Because, again, it's these little things that make a huge difference. So I think it's been a really good discussion so far. And I'll just kind of hang out for a minute and answer any questions. I've gotten a lot of people through the SSRI process, see a lot of vets. I'm a prior vet as well. And so I'm at the VA process. The VA is very generous in the way it does these evaluations. I'll say generous in quotes. There are certainly people who have been ignored by the VA system and not been treated well. But I do see, when I say generous, what I mean is that there are people who get ratings for things that pretty, high numbers for disability ratings where the person's not that impaired. And when I go back and review the paperwork, they never said they were that impaired, but the VA decided to err on the side of awarding them a higher disability level. But those are all navigable processes. I think this is just a great forum, great discussion. With the insurance stuff, with Abby, yeah, I have my private practice. I have self-pay. I have insurance pay. It's a pain in the butt. Insurances just don't like to pay. They will pay mostly for an adjustment disorder now. They didn't used to. And an adjustment disorder is oftentimes not disqualifying once it's resolved. But if you have a long, history of adjustment disorder, multiple months of treatment, you're probably going to get deferred. And then you'll have to kind of come back with some documentation showing that's fully resolved. And then you'll probably get on a regular medical rather than a special issuance on the adjustment disorder. But I'll hang out for a minute and answer questions. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Sargent. I'm going to send it back to Tammy at this point.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, we are going to start the question and answer scope of it. So we have joined us all the people: Davis, Stephanie, Dr. Timmons, Dr. Powell, Dr. Sargent. Thank you for sticking around to answer questions. We'll see how they come in. And before we begin, just a few reminders to help us stay within the scope and make this useful for everyone. Please keep the questions general rather than case specific. We are not able to review or advise on individual medical situations. And if your question has more than one part, please ask them separately. Enter your questions into the chat, and our volunteers will help us monitor the chat, and I'll try to lead the discussion as best I can to keep us on track. Just to make sure the space remains educational and appropriate. Some people we will get back to on this, quietly. So if we haven't answered it by the end, stick around and we'll see what we can do, or we'll try to do it before the end, before we cut you off. All right. I do have a question that came in. It's a little long, so I'm not sure who's best to answer it. But the person is asking, if you see a therapist who bills insurance, and I think Abby talked about one way to avoid that. But the therapist never tells you that you've been diagnosed with anything, what diagnosis does the FAA consider relevant? For example, they've heard that a therapist sometimes uses codes like adjustment disorder for billing purposes alone. If that's just for billing, is it still something that needs to be disclosed to the FAA? Or is the FAA only concerned with certain diagnoses such as psychiatric disorders?
Right.
Can anyone
So
step up to that?
just to kind of start that off with, I would disclose it to the FAA no matter what, because you are able to write that personal statement. You are able to bring in all of the notes. The FAA will request those no matter what. And then those notes, if the therapist has done their due diligence, which they are trained and it should have in the assessment portion what they believe your functioning is, how you believe that you were impacted, and if there is any impairment. Now, if it's only for billing, still, no matter what, if something happens and the FAA is able to get a hold of any record whatsoever, there's going to be more damage to have to defend yourself rather than if you come clean. So I would say go through the headache now and protect yourself later.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's see. Okay, don't know who best can answer this either, but the person is wondering about some outside of Western medicine, like if they had taken illicit drugs in the hopes of getting a psychic change a couple of years ago. Does that need to be reported? Should that just be completely shut down? Should you tell that to your therapist?
Dr. Timmons or Dr. Sargent, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so my my opinion on that stuff is yes, report it if it's um relevant and part of your medical history. Um, it getting into kind of a big gray zone, I guess. If something was a long time ago and I that it does get tricky in that sense where um, do you need to report every little thing that ever happened? But to me, if it's significant, it probably should be reported. But I know on the medical history form, the form 8500-8, or in MedExpress, they ask about something within the past 2 years. Uh, uh, a legal substance taken has to be reported. So I guess everyone should, just read that and use their best judgment and possibly consult, somebody on the legal side to for the best guidance on that. Dr. Sargent?
All right.
Yeah, I've got a good one there. So that's a good question, right? Because in the question itself, it says you were taking it for a psychiatric or psychological purpose. If you surveyed all pilots across the United States, what percentage took a recreational drug at some point in their life just to experiment? A high percentage. And so, Dr. Timmons is right. For the paperwork, you should report exactly on the paperwork what the paperwork's asking for. If it says they send you a form that says, have you ever taken any psychotropic medication for any purpose? Yeah, answer yeah. But if you took a recreational, if you took, magic mushrooms once in high school at a party, and you're 30 years old now, and it was never really, I'm not sure if that's really relevant to anybody's ongoing mental health. If you were taking them though, like psilocybin. So for example, the unfortunate case of the gentleman who was a Horizon Air pilot in 2023, he was taking psychedelic mushrooms for mental health purposes, wanted to stay off the record and had a prolonged psychotic break and tried to shut the engines down. They had to restart those. And so that poor gentleman wound up in court and all sorts of legal consequences. And by all accounts, he's not a bad guy, but he got charged with, I think, 86 counts of attempted murder because he was inappropriately using psychotropic medications, non-regulated medications for these types of purposes. And so I think you're going to see this wild world kind of open up. So you're going to see psilocybin probably approved as an FDA approved treatment for depression in the United States within the next 3 to 5 years. It's coming. You're going to see things like TMS, which is a really good one. That's a really good case study. So many people are getting treated with TMS now, where it's FDA approved for treatment resistant depression. You're seeing people all across the spectrum get treated with TMS. And if you are currently on, if you've recently or within the last couple of years received TMS as a treatment, it's going to be disqualifying. Going to be disqualifying anyway. But I think you're going to see TMS be one of those things that if you had it in the past and it's been a while, you can probably get it waived because it is so common. But long story short, disclose. You're just disclose, and don't try to hide things. It'll just hurt you later.
And sorry, but what can TMS, what is that for those of us who don't
Yeah.
know?
There's two treatments right now that are FDA approved for treatment-resistant depression. There's actually more than just two, but the two main ones. Number one is transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a powerful magnet that you put over the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and you get 36 treatments over a period of 6 weeks, and it can knock your depression into remission if you've had lack of remission with other meds, or if you've just had severe side effects from SSRIs and you don't want the medicine that you take a pill, it goes everywhere. If you really can't tolerate pills, then TMS is a reasonable option. The other one is Spravato, or S-ketamine. It's a ketamine-based drug. It's the left levorotatory version. That is an ongoing treatment that has maintenance associated with it. So you might take and go through an induction phase of 12 treatments, but then people will be getting it once a month or once every other month. It is a dissociative anesthetic. I think that's going to be harder to approve in the future because it has this ongoing requirement for it. But you will, I guarantee
Hmm.
we're going to see people who have had these things in the past because it was lucrative for the clinic to provide it, may not really have actually been indicated. Now the person's doing a lot better. If somebody's going through severe grief, or let's say you've had something horrible, they've been through childhood sexual trauma, and I've seen amazing results with these treatments, and yet people can get better, and we need to give people the option to be able to get better and get on with their lives, and get into aviation and be able to do that. But these are new. The treatments evolve faster than the policy does, and so we just have to be prepared to really get to know somebody and know what makes them tick. And I think that's what a good personal statement is about, is letting the FAA see what makes me tick. Like the bullet point format and the highly structured, I don't think that's as useful as something that really comes from the heart and is well written, not AI written, personally written. And so I think, and that's how a good psyche eval will go too. When you meet with it'll feel like just somebody trying to understand you and be able to document what are your protective factors and risk factors. Over.
Shoot, I wish we had a little more time for, I think we opened up a lot, but as you can tell, mental health has made a lot of changes. They've done a lot in the FAA to try to wrap this up. I have just one quick question, and it's counterpart, I think, about life coaches. They don't require a diagnosis. Is that a good alternative? And also,
So,
is group therapy different than individual therapy as far as the diagnosis goes?
so
Abby,
when
do you know
yeah,
those?
sorry, when talking about coaching, because I do both therapy, but also do offer coaching because it is very skills based. So there are definitely people out there who attempt to disguise therapy as coaching, and that puts their license at risk if there is a license. To be had, and it is completely unregulated. So I will be very transparent about that. Anybody can call themselves a life coach. So you do not have to have any sort of training whatsoever. And so if you are going to see a coach for any reason, you are going to want to ensure that they're doing this ethically. So this means that they have some sort of training to actually support and not harm you. Because harm can be done. I know of somebody who claims to be a coach and they have recommended specific medications that people should take, which is a huge no-no, and that it was very transparently written on the FAA website that that is not allowed. So there are some risks, but if you do your due diligence, you can find some people who are very ethical about it, and I would definitely recommend to request a call with them prior to starting their services and ask them questions such as what their stance is when it comes to assessing for when you may need to step up and do therapy. Because if there is a diagnosis there and there is something to be treated, you don't want someone who is not qualified to do that, and you want someone to be able to do it ethically. Group therapy,
Group
you
therapy.
usually have to have a specific diagnosis involved, and that typically is very skills based. And so you can report it, but usually you won't have to have a diagnosis involved. Individual therapy, you will get into the deeper work, and so it can be very effective as well, but it really just depends on your needs.
All right, thank you so much. And Stephanie, I didn't see that last one that you indicated.
Yeah, there's a question that says or asks, what if your doctor accidentally mislabels self-harm slash suicidal ideation on your record? How would you navigate that process? Maybe Dr. Timmons or Dr. Powell.
Yeah, so that can happen. It needs to be evaluated if it's there. Unfortunately, if it really wasn't didn't apply, hopefully that would come out in the evaluation with the psychologist and psychiatrist. Um, but it's if it's written, it's not something that can just be ignored or where they can just take someone's word for it. So it's got to be addressed, and that situation has happened, but it is possible to overcome it.
Okay, thank
And I would
you.
just add on there as well too, you can ask the doctor to also just write another note on top of that and state that there is something mislabeled. My husband has had a psych evaluation when leaving the military, and the doctor left out the word not, and that caused a huge issue. It was client has not had a TBI instead of client has a TBI, has had a TBI. So
Yeah,
it
good point.
happens. Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
both. One last thing, there was a question about how much money should a student pilot expect to spend on the medical clearance process? And I just want to say that we did kind of cover cost in a previous webinar session. And it also is very dependent on the case because some cases are going to be issued with the new guidance that's out now. You might be issued without having to have any evaluations and anything else. Other cases are going to be quite involved, and it's your due diligence to find the doctor that you want to not be overpriced for. Meaning, again, not all HIMS, AMEs, psychologists, and psychiatrists are equal. They have their own practices and they operate independently, and they can charge what they want, essentially within reason, we would like to say. But that's your due diligence to find the doctors and pay appropriately. So it's a gamut of cost. I'm going to ask Davis to give him a question. What would you say your costs were for your case?
Oh, well, the fax error costs an extra like $800 because my psychiatrist is entirely cash based. He doesn't do insurance, and he's $700 an hour. And it took 3 months to get everything resubmitted, and I needed a new summary letter. Beside that, I think I was probably in around 5,000, all in between the original summary letter, the AME, and my HIMS doctor. But I do know my HIMS doctor for the psychological evaluation was actually not too bad. I think it was like around somewhere between 2 and 4 or something like that. But I do know that there are some that are way more than that. So I think I got off pretty good, but I also researched a ton to find that person. So
All right. Well, thank you very much, Davis. Thank you, Dr. Timmons. Dr. Stanton had to leave, but he checked off. Thank you, Dr. Powell. Or Abby. Let's see. Sorry, I'm going to wrap it up here. I know we've been a little bit over, so I just want to say that you can find these webinar recordings, educational materials on Clear Skies Nonprofit under the medical certification tab. We support a couple peer support groups, Fellow Travelers for Aviation, and the Birds of a Feather AA and Al-Anon meetings which are specifically for pilots and aviation family members. Today's discussion was educational only. Obviously, as we see here, the FAA process does change and individual situations vary greatly. So always rely on official guidance and appropriate professionals when making certification decisions. Our next session is going to be psychological testing and evaluations on July 15th with Dr. DeSalvia, and we hope that you join us. If you'd like to support our mission, there'll be a QR code. I think it's coming up on the next slide. There we go. And we'd love to connect with you. Thank you so much for being part of this community and helping move aviation culture in a healthier direction. Thanks again.